The hills are alive. For 60 years, this melody has defined the childhood of millions, standing as the ultimate cinematic beacon of hope and joy. But when the cameras stopped rolling, the fairy tale ended abruptly. Behind the wholesome smiles of the Von Trapp family lay a dark reality of devastating financial struggles, brutal illnesses, and tragic premature deaths. Today, we peel back the curtain to reveal the heartbreaking final chapters of the cast members who have left us. The music remains, but their silence speaks volumes. Christopher Plummer joined the film 1965 as Captain Georg von Trapp, the reluctant legend who despised the role that made him an immortal icon. Christopher Plummer was 36 years old when he accepted the role of the stern Austrian patriarch, a decision he regretted almost immediately. He famously loathed the movie, calling it the sound of mucus, and admitted to being drunk on set just to tolerate the saccharine sweetness of the script. In 1965, he was a respected stage actor, but not a movie star, commanding a salary estimated between $35,000 and $50,000, roughly $300,000, $450,000 today. While this was a respectable upper-middle-class income, it was a pittance compared to the film's eventual $2.5 billion inflation-adjusted box office gross. Plummer initially had no profit participation, meaning he watched the studio rake in millions while he simply moved on to the next job. His personal life was equally turbulent. During filming, his marriage to journalist Patricia Lewis was crumbling, leading to a divorce in 1967, one of 3 failed marriages in his life. Despite his eventual acceptance of the role in his later years, his end was sudden and tragic. He died on February 5, 2021 at the age of 91 after suffering an accidental fall at his home in Connecticut that resulted in a fatal blow to the head. He left behind a substantial net worth of $20 million of fortune built on 70 years of relentless work rather than just one musical. Fun fact: he hated the song Edelweiss so much that he refused to sing it live, requiring a dubber, which leads us to the film's biggest secret. Christopher Plummer provided the face of the captain, but the soul-stirring voice that sang Edelweiss belonged to a man who was paid a servant's wage to remain invisible. Bill Lee joined the film 1965 as Captain Von Trapp, singing Voice at 49. The ghost singer whose voice defined a generation, yet he died in relative obscurity. Bill Lee was the unsung hero of The Sound of Music, hired to dub Christopher Plummer's singing parts because Plummer's own vocals lacked the necessary warmth. While the soundtrack album sold millions of copies, becoming one of the best-selling LPs in history, Bill Lee was paid a standard Screen Actors Guild session fee for ghost singers. He likely received a flat payment of approximately $500 to $1,000, roughly $5,000 today, with absolutely zero royalties. He watched as the world fell in love with his voice while he struggled to pay the bills as a freelance commercial singer. His career was prolific. He voiced characters in Mary Poppins and The Jungle Book, but he was always the voice, never the face. His tragedy was the silence that followed his years of song. He passed away on November 15, 1980, from a brain tumor at the age of 64. He died not as a millionaire music mogul, but as a working-class musician, leaving behind a modest estate estimated at under $300. The industry that used his voice to generate billions never gave him the financial credit he deserved. Fun fact: if you listen closely to the song Edelweiss, the deep, resonant final note is actually Bill Lee, while the shorter, spoken-sung parts are Plummer. The editors spliced them together seamlessly. The captain's heart was torn between Maria and the Baroness, played by a Hollywood royalty, whose glamorous life ended in a quiet, lonely fade-out. Eleanor Parker joined the film 1965 as the Baroness Elsa Schrader at 43, the woman of 1,000 faces, whose sophisticated villainy hit a fading star's heartbreak. Eleanor Parker was already a 3-time Oscar nominee when she took the role of the Baroness. In 1965, she was arguably a bigger star than Julie Andrews, commanding a salary estimated at $50,000 to $75,000, reflecting her status as a Hollywood leading lady. However, The Sound of Music ironically marked the beginning of her decline. As the wicked stepmother figure, the public turned against her and the big movie offers dried up. Behind the furs and diamonds of the Baroness was a woman with a chaotic personal life, enduring 4 marriages and 3 divorces, constantly searching for the stability her character seemed to possess. She spent her final years far removed from the spotlight in Palm Springs, watching her contemporaries pass away one by one. She died on December 9, 2013, at the age of 91 from complications of pneumonia. Unlike many of her co-stars who struggled, she was financially savvy, leaving behind a net worth of approximately $10 million, but she died with the melancholy title of being one of the greatest actresses never to win an Academy Award. Fun fact: contrary to her icy on-screen persona, she was actually a mother figure to the young cast on set. Julie Andrews famously said she had trouble being mean to Parker in scenes because Eleanor was so kind in real life. The Baroness always traveled with her eccentric friend Max, played by a man who made the world laugh, while hiding a lonely secret life that could have destroyed his career. Richard Haydn joined the film 1965 as Max Detweiler at 60, the comical moocher whose on-screen eccentricity masked a life of forced solitude. Richard Haydn played Uncle Max, the charming, morally flexible music promoter. A British character actor known for his nasally voice, he was paid a solid supporting actor's wage, likely around $15,000 to $20,000 for the film. While Max Detweiler was the life of the party, Richard Haydn was intensely private. In the conservative 1960s, Haydn lived as a closeted gay man. Exposing his true self would have instantly ended his career and ruined his livelihood. This forced him into a reclusive existence, often gardening alone, to avoid the prying eyes of Hollywood tabloids. He lived comfortably but quietly, a stark contrast to the flamboyant character he portrayed. Tragically, he died alone. On April 25, 1985, he suffered a massive heart attack at his home in Pacific Palisades at the age of 80. His body was found by his gardener. He left behind an estate estimated at $500,000 to $1 million, leaving no children and no spouse, just a legacy of laughter that hid a lifetime of having to wear a mask. Fun fact: he was also a legendary voice actor, famously providing the voice of the caterpillar in Disney's Alice in Wonderland, 1951. Uncle Max was willing to work with the Nazis to survive, but our next character was the face of the regime itself, a villain played by a gentleman who spent his career typecast as a monster. Ben Wright joined the film 1965 as Herd Zeller at 50, the terrifying Nazi Gauleiter who was actually a soft-spoken British gentleman trapped in a villain's skin. Ben Wright played the chilling Herd Zeller, the face of the Third Reich, in the film. Despite the menacing role, Wright was a kind British actor who simply had a face that casting directors associated with evil. His pay for the role was a standard day player, rate accumulating to roughly $3,000 to $5,000, for his few scenes, a negligible sum for playing one of cinema's most hated antagonists. Throughout his career, he struggled to break free from typecasting, often playing Nazis or stuffy officials, which stifled his earning potential compared to leading men. His life didn't end in a dramatic bunker, but in a hospital room. He underwent open-heart surgery in 1989 and never fully recovered. He passed away on July 2, 1989, at the age of 74. He left behind a modest middle-class estate estimated at under $500,000, proving that being the bad guy in a blockbuster doesn't pay nearly as well as being the hero. Fun fact: in a delightful twist of irony, the man who played a Nazi was also the voice of Roger Radcliffe, the gentle songwriter and dog owner in Disney's 101 Dalmatians, 1961. Herd Zeller was the loud, obvious threat, but the Von Trapp family was being watched from inside their own home by a servant who was secretly plotting their downfall. Gilchrist Stewart joined the film 1965 as Franz at 46, the treacherous butler whose on-screen betrayal mirrored the cold, unsentimental reality of a career spent in the shadows. Gilchrist Stewart was a British-born actor who made a career playing stiff formal authority figures. In The Sound of Music, he played Franz the butler, who secretly blows the whistle on the Von Trapp family to the Nazis. Despite being a pivotal plot device, the man who essentially ends the family's safety, Stewart was considered a day player by the studio. His compensation was shockingly low, adhering to the 1965 Screen Actors Guild minimums. He likely earned approximately $350 per week, totaling perhaps $2,500 for the entire shoot. While the film went on to gross millions, ensuring the studio executives bought mansions in Bel Air, Stewart saw no residuals, no bonuses, and no glory. He remained a working-class actor hustling for small parts in television shows like Batman and The Man from Uncelley, just to make rent. His tragedy was not a scandalous explosion, but a quiet, premature exit. He developed cancer at a relatively young age and passed away on June 8, 1977, at just 58 years old. He died years before the film's massive VHS and DVD revivals, meaning he never witnessed the true longevity of his work. He left behind a negligible estate estimated at under $100,000, a humble sum for a man whose face is recognized by billions of people. Fun fact: despite playing a staunch Austrian Nazi sympathizer, Stewart was actually born in London and served in the British military, making his convincing performance a testament to his often overlooked acting range. Franz ruled the household with a cold stare, but he shared the servants' quarters with a housekeeper, played by a woman who made a living playing victims, yet died a lonely death of old age. Norma Varden joined the film 1965 as Frau Schmidt at 67, the grumpy housekeeper who represented the dying aristocracy, played by a legend who faded into silence. Norma Varden was a veteran character actress famous for playing snooty upper-class women when she took the role of the housekeeper Frau Schmidt. By 1965, she was 67 years old and nearing the end of a prolific career. Despite her impressive resume appearing in Casablanca and Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, she was not paid a star's salary. Her fee for The Sound of Music was a flat rate estimated between $5,000 and $7,000 with no back-end points. She lived in the era before actors could retire comfortably on residuals. She had to keep working well into her 70s to maintain her lifestyle. Her final years were marked by the slow, quiet isolation that affects many aging Hollywood players. She suffered from heart failure and passed away on January 19, 1989 at the age of 90 in Santa Barbara. There were no massive tributes or front-page headlines. She simply slipped away. She left behind a modest estate of approximately $500,000, mostly in property, a stark contrast to the opulence of the villa she managed on screen. She was the last guard of a golden era of character actors who were essential to films but treated as disposable labor. Fun fact: she is perhaps most famous to Hitchcock fans as the poor woman who gets nearly strangled by Robert Walker in Strangers on a Train 1951 during a tennis match demonstration. From the domestic staff, we move to the spiritual leader of the story, played by a Broadway icon who suffered the humiliation of losing her greatest gift just as the camera started rolling. Peggy Wood joined the film 1965 as Mother Abbess at 73, the Oscar-nominated matriarch who sang the film's anthem while hiding a devastating secret about her failing voice. Peggy Wood was 73 years old and a revered star of stage and early television, famous for Mama when she was cast as the Mother Abbess. She was the production's most prestigious casting choice for the older generation, commanding a salary significantly higher than the nuns around her, estimated at $25,000 to $30,000 for her supporting role. However, this prestige hit a painful reality. Wood, once a celebrated soprano, could no longer hit the high notes required for Climb Every Mountain. The producers realized this too late, and she suffered the quiet humiliation of being dubbed by a younger singer, Marjorie McKay, for the song's climax. It was a crushing blow to the pride of a woman who had defined musical theater in her youth. Her final years were plagued by declining health. She suffered a massive stroke that left her debilitated. She died on March 18, 1978, at the age of 86. She left behind a net worth of roughly $1 million, a comfortable sum, but she died with the lingering sadness that her most famous musical moment on film was not fully her own. Fun fact: during the filming of Climb Every Mountain, she kept slipping backward because the set designer had built the floor at a steep angle to make the actress look taller and more imposing. The Mother Abbess was kind and forgiving, but she ruled over a convent that included a cynical critic a nun played by a cabaret legend who battled cancer with a pen in her hand. Portia Nelson joined the film 1965 as Sister Bert at 45, the acerbic nun who criticized Maria, played by a multi-talented artist whose creativity was stifled by cancer. Portia Nelson played Sister Bert, the nun who famously sang that Maria was not an asset to the abbey. Nelson was far more than a background nun. She was a celebrated cabaret singer-songwriter and author in New York. However, Hollywood viewed her as a minor character actor. Her pay for The Sound of Music was minimal, likely the SAG weekly minimum of $350 to $500, totaling a few $1,000s for a role that immortalized her face. The disparity between her talent and her compensation was immense. Nelson's life was a battle against her own body. She fought a long, grueling war with breast cancer, a disease that ravaged her physically but never broke her spirit. She turned her pain into art, writing the famous poem Autobiography in 5 short chapters about the struggle of breaking bad habits. She passed away on March 6, 2001 at the age of 80. She didn't leave behind a massive fortune. Her estate was estimated at under $500,000, but she left behind a cult following in the cabaret world that far exceeded the grumpy nun she played on screen. Fun fact: she was the only cast member who was actually a vocal coach and songwriter in real life, and she often helped the other nuns with their harmonies between takes. Sister Berta was the critic, but she was balanced by a supporter. A nun played by a soap opera veteran who would later suffer a catastrophic accident that left her paralyzed but unbroken. Anna Lee joined the film 1965 as Sister Margareta at 52, the kind-hearted nun whose later life was a testament to survival after a paralyzing tragedy. Anna Lee played Sister Margareta, the gentle nun, who reveals she saved the spark plugs to help the family escape. Lee was a British beauty who had been working in Hollywood since the 1930s. Her salary for The Sound of Music was that of a working journeyman actor, roughly $5,000 for the shoot. She didn't have the luxury of retiring on this income. She continued to work tirelessly, eventually becoming a legend as Lila Quartermain on General Hospital. Her life took a tragic turn in a car accident later in life that left her paralyzed from the waist down. Most actors would have vanished, but Lee needed the money and loved the craft. She had the scriptwriters rewrite her soap opera character to be wheelchair-bound so she could keep earning her paycheck. She worked until the very end, dying of pneumonia on May 14, 2004, at the age of 91. She left behind a net worth of $5 million, every cent earned through sheer grit and the refusal to let a wheelchair end her career. Fun fact: she was the goddaughter of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, the creator of Sherlock Holmes, giving her a direct link to literary history. We've met the singing nuns, but one of the sisters in the background was actually holding a secret double life as one of the most decorated costume designers in Oscar history. Dorothy Jenkins joined the film 1965 as Sister Augusta at 51, the Hollywood visionary who stepped out from behind the camera for a rare cameo only to be consumed by her own artistic obsession. Dorothy Jenkins appears briefly as Sister Augusta, but her true role was the architect of the film's visual soul. She was the costume designer. Jenkins was a titan of the industry, the very first person to ever win an Academy Award for costume design for Joan of Arc in 1948. By 1965, while the nuns on screen were paid a humble day rate of roughly $100 to $150, Jenkins was earning a top-tier designer salary, likely in the range of $20,000 to $25,000 for the production, a massive sum for a crew member reflecting her elite status. However, the tragedy of Jenkins' life was the toll her perfectionism took on her health. She was a workaholic who sacrificed her personal life for the screen, designing for the 10 Commandments and The Music Man. She lived for the work, often at the expense of her own well-being. While she dressed the Von Trapps in curtains and couture, she lived a life of intense pressure and isolation, common among female pioneers in a male-dominated crew world. She passed away on November 21, 1995, at the age of 81 from ovarian cancer. She left behind a net worth of approximately $3 million and a legacy of 12 Oscar nominations. Yet few viewers realize the nun in the background was the woman who created the very fabric of the film. Fun fact: she famously refused to sign a long-term contract with any major studio, preferring to freelance, so she could choose her projects, a radical and risky financial move for a woman in the 1950s that ultimately paid off. Sister Augusta created the costumes, but the nun standing next to her possessed a voice that saved Hollywood's biggest musicals, yet she was threatened with blacklisting if she ever claimed credit for it. Marni Nixon joined the film 1965 as Sister Sophia at 35, the ghost singer of Hollywood, who was finally allowed to show her face after years of being the secret voice of famous stars. Marni Nixon played Sister Sophia, the nun who sings that Maria has a wimple. For decades, Nixon was the industry's dirty little secret. She provided the singing voices for Deborah Kerr in The King, and Natalie Wood in West Side Story, and Audrey Hepburn in My Fair Lady. While these films generated hundreds of millions and won Oscars for the actresses, Nixon was paid a humiliating session fee. For The King and I, she received a mere $420 total for singing the lead roles while the stars earned fortunes. She was explicitly threatened by studio executives that she would be blacklisted if she ever revealed she was the real voice. The Sound of Music was her vindication. Director Robert Wise finally gave her an on-screen role and a credit. However, the financial damage of years of uncredited work meant she never amassed the wealth of the stars she dubbed. She died on July 24, 2016, at the age of 86 from breast cancer. She left behind a modest estate of roughly $1 million, a comfortable sum, but a fraction of the royalties she should have earned had she been given proper credit on the soundtrack albums that sold millions of copies. Fun fact: her husband was Ernest Gold, the Oscar-winning composer of the theme for the movie Exodus, making them one of the most musically powerful yet publicly understated couples in Hollywood history. We leave the Abbey and head to the captain's grand party, where the guests in the background included a woman who was once a headline star in the 1930s, reduced to silence in the 1960s. Doris Lloyd joined the film 1965 as Baroness Eberfeld at 69, the aristocratic party guest whose silent presence marked the melancholy end of a prolific career. Doris Lloyd appeared as the Baroness Eberfeld during the grand ball sequence. Decades earlier, Lloyd was a staple of major Hollywood films, appearing in the original Tarzan the Ape Man, 1932, and The Secret Life of Walter Mitty, 1947. By 1965, however, the industry had moved on. At age 69, her role in The Sound of Music was essentially atmosphere, paid at a daily rate for character actors estimated at $300 to $400 per day. It is a harsh reality of Hollywood. A woman who once shared the screen with legends was now virtually indistinguishable from the extras fighting for a few seconds of screen time to qualify for health insurance. This was one of her final film appearances. The tragedy of Doris Lloyd is the quiet erasure of aging actresses. She died on May 21, 1968, just 3 years after the film's release at the age of 71. She was buried in Forest Lawn Memorial Park, leaving behind a modest estate estimated at $250,000, the savings of a woman who worked consistently for 40 years, but never crossed the threshold into superstardom. Fun fact: she provided the voice of the snooty Rose in Disney's animated Alice in Wonderland, 1951, proving that even when you couldn't see her, her patrician British voice was unmistakable. Doris Lloyd was a veteran of the talkies, but standing near her in the ballroom was a woman who had been a star before movies even had sound, holding on to a career that spanned nearly a century. Gertrude Astor joined the film 1965 as party guest at 78. The silent film legend who went from earning thousands a week to earning extra pay in her twilight years. Gertrude Astor, towering over the other guests, was a genuine piece of cinema history. In the 1920s, she was the very first actress to sign a contract with Universal Studios, earning $1,000 per week, a fortune in 1920, and starring in classics like The Cat and the Canary. By 1965, the talkies and age had eroded her status. For The Sound of Music, she was hired as a background player, likely earning the standard extra rate of $25 to $35 per day. The financial fall from grace from a contracted star living in a mansion to an elderly extra hoping for a call sheet is one of the most brutal examples of Hollywood's memory loss. However, Astor refused to pity herself. She continued to work as an extra until she was physically unable to stand, driven by a love for the set. She died on her 90th birthday, November 9th, 1977, following a stroke. She left behind a negligible financial estate, but a filmography of over 250 credits, dying as she lived a working woman of the pictures. Fun fact: she was famously tall, 5'11", which actually hurt her leading lady prospects in the 1920s because she towered over many of the male stars, forcing directors to cast her as the villain or the other woman. Gertrude Astor was a fallen star, but another guest at the party was living in the shadow of a current superstar, a man whose own sister was the highest-paid woman in America, while he stood in the background. Burt Stevens joined the film 1965 as party guest at 60, the Hollywood royal who spent his life as Mr. Nobody while his sister ruled the box office. Burt Stevens is credited simply as party guest, a generic title for a man with a famous DNA. He was the younger brother of the legendary Barbara Stanwyck. While Stanwyck was earning $150,000 per film and owning Beverly Hills, Burt spent his life as a background actor and stand-in, earning the minimum daily rate of $25 to $50. The contrast was staggering: siblings living in the same city, working in the same industry, but separated by millions of dollars in a chasm of fame. Some rumors suggest Stanwyck helped him financially, while others claim he wanted independence, even if it meant poverty. His tragedy was one of comparison. He appeared in hundreds of films, almost always nameless, a ghost in the machine that made his sister an icon. He died on December 14, 1964, shortly after filming his scenes for The Sound of Music, and before the film was even released. He was 59 years old. He left behind almost no assets, a stark reminder that talent or luck does not always run in the family. Fun fact: if you look closely at the party scene, his resemblance to Barbara Stanwyck is uncanny, particularly around the eyes, serving as a haunting Easter egg for classic film fans. The party guests were mostly aging actors, but one soldier in the background was famous for his physique, a bodybuilder whose muscles were legendary, even if his acting career never flexed beyond tiny roles. Ervin Zabokashevsky joined the film 1965 as soldier contestant at 41, the bodybuilding icon whose physical perfection couldn't buy him a speaking role. Ervin Zabokashevsky appeared in the background as a soldier and is often spotted in the festival crowd, but in the world of fitness, he was a god. Famous for his Zabo abs, he was considered to have the greatest abdominal definition in history, winning Mr. Los Angeles and Mr. California. Despite his physical elite status, Hollywood saw him merely as meat. His pay for The Sound of Music was a standard extras fee, roughly $30 per day. While he graced the covers of muscle and fitness magazines that sold globally, he struggled to transition into acting like his peer Arnold Schwarzenegger later would. He spent his life working in gyms and taking bit parts to make ends meet, never achieving financial wealth from his legendary physique. He passed away on March 29, 2009 at the age of 84 from pneumonia. He left behind a cult legacy in the bodybuilding world, but a modest middle-class net worth, proving that in Hollywood having the perfect body is often worth less than having the right last name. Fun fact: he was famous for a specific posing routine where he would do a full backflip on stage during bodybuilding competitions, a feat of athleticism that no other bodybuilder of his size could perform at the time. The background was full of silent stories, but our next actor was a man who spent his career trying to stand out, only to be one of thousands of faces in the crowd. Leon Alton joined the film 1965 as party guest at 58, the anonymous face in the crowd whose decades of labor were erased by the industry's cruel amnesia. Leon Alton was the definition of a working actor, a man who appeared in over 100 films and television shows, yet whose name never appeared on a movie poster. In The Sound of Music, he was simply a party guest, human furniture designed to make the scene look expensive. For this service, he was paid the 1965 Screen Actors Guild. Extras rate a meager $25 to $35 per day. While the film generated $286 million in its initial run, over $2.5 billion today, Alton and his fellow background players received absolutely zero residuals. They were paid for their time, not their likeness. This was the harsh economic reality of the atmosphere actor. They stood next to legends like Christopher Plummer, breathing the same air, yet financially they were worlds apart. Alton spent his entire life chasing the next day call, never securing the financial safety net of a contract. He died on August 25, 1995, at the age of 88. He passed away in obscurity, leaving behind a negligible estate and a resume full of uncredited roles. His life serves as a somber reminder that for every star who shines, there are 1,000 shadows who simply fade away. Fun fact: he was a master of the silent conversation, a technique extras use to look like they are talking in the background without making a sound so they don't ruin the audio recording. Leon Alton was just one face in the crowd, but standing near him was another veteran extra who appeared in some of the greatest films of all time, yet died with a bank account that barely reflected his contribution to cinema history. William Meter joined the film 1965 as party guest at 61, the silent witness to Hollywood history who died waiting for a role that would give him a name. William Meter was a fixture of the studio system, a man who had been appearing in films since the 1930s. He was a party guest in The Sound of Music, but he was also a soldier, a reporter, and a pedestrian in dozens of other classics. Despite his longevity, his financial standing was stagnant. In 1965, he was earning the same low daily rate, approximately $30 per day, that he had been earning for years, barely keeping up with inflation. The disparity between his effort and his reward is staggering. He contributed to the texture of films that defined American culture, yet he died without the wealth or recognition that such a career should command. He was part of the invisible workforce of Hollywood men and women who were essential to the illusion of reality, but treated as disposable commodities. Meter passed away on March 15, 1979, at the age of 74. He left behind an estate estimated at under $120, leaving the world as silently as he inhabited his roles, a ghost on celluloid who never got to speak his truth. Fun fact: he appeared in The Manchurian Candidate and My Fair Lady in the same era, hopping from set to set, changing costumes from a political thriller to a musical in a single week just to pay the rent. While Meter hopped from set to set, another man in the ballroom had turned background acting into an endurance sport, logging a career that spanned nearly 70 years of silence. Monty O'Grady joined the film 1965 as party guest at 49. The king of extras, whose six-decade career was a marathon of anonymity and modest paychecks. Monty O'Grady was perhaps the most prolific background actor of his generation. From the silent era to the turn of the millennium, O'Grady was there. In The Sound of Music, he added sophistication to the captain's ball, but his wallet did not reflect the luxury he portrayed. O'Grady worked for the standard union minimums his entire life, collecting daily checks of roughly $30 to $50 depending on the decade. He never negotiated $1 million contract. He never saw a back-end point. He was a volume player relying on being reliable. The tragedy of O'Grady's life was not a sudden accident, but the slow, grinding reality of being always present, never noticed. He witnessed the golden age of Hollywood turn into the corporate blockbuster era, yet his status never changed. He died on March 8, 2000 at the age of 84 from heart failure. He left behind a filmography that rivals the biggest stars in length, but a net worth of under $200,000, the humble savings of a man who spent his life pretending to be rich people at parties. Fun fact: he was one of the very few actors to appear in both the 1930s version of A Star is Born and the 1954 version, playing a background extra in both, linking generations of cinema. The men in the ballroom were fixtures of the industry, but the final guest on our list was a woman who brought elegance to the screen, only to vanish into the archives of time just before the tragedy struck the main cast. Leota Richards joined the film 1965 as party guest at 58, the elegant socialite of the screen whose graceful presence could not protect her from the erasure of old age. Leota Richards was cast as a party guest because she possessed an aristocratic bearing that the camera loved. She was often cast as society ladies, patrons of the arts, or wealthy widows. However, this was acting, not reality. Richards was a working woman who relied on the $35 per day extra rate to survive in Los Angeles. She didn't have the mansions or the jewels she wore on set. Her career was a series of brief moments standing in the background while others sang and danced into history. The melancholy of her story lies in her anonymity. Despite being immortalized in one of the most watched films in human history, she died with almost no public record of her life. She passed away on February 7, 1998, at the age of 90. Her death marked the end of the atmosphere generation, the people who built the world of the sound of music, but were never allowed to live in it. She left behind a modest estate, unnoticed by the millions who watch her face every Christmas. Fun fact: she started her career much later in life than most, proving that you could enter the dream factory at any age, even if the factory only offered you a standing room only ticket. The party guests have faded into the background, but now the music stops. We move from the silence of the extras to the shattering heartbreak of the main cast, starting with the mischievous Louisa, whose sudden death left the world weeping. Heather Menzies-Zurich joined the film 1965 as Louisa von Trapp at 16, the mischievous prankster whose fairy tale life was brutally cut short by a 4-week nightmare. Heather Menzies was only 15 years old when she played Louisa, the third oldest von Trapp child. While the film made her a global icon, the financial rewards were shockingly slim for the children. They were paid a flat salary estimated at roughly $2,000 to $4,000 for the entire production, adjusted for inflation. That's barely $35,000 today. Crucially, the children received no royalties from the soundtrack or video sales for decades, only receiving a small ceremonial payment years later after a legal dispute. Heather's adult life was marked by a devastating emotional blow. She lost her beloved husband, actor Robert Urich, to a rare cancer in 2002, leaving her a grieving widow. But her final tragedy was the most shocking of all. In November 2017, she was diagnosed with glioblastoma multiforme and aggressive brain cancer. She had no time to fight, no time to say goodbye. She died on December 24, 2017, Christmas Eve, just 4 weeks after her diagnosis. She was 68. She left behind a net worth of $3 million, mostly from her husband's career and her own later work. But money meant nothing against a disease that stole her during the holiday season she helped make famous. Fun fact: she famously posed for Playboy magazine in the 1970s in a bid to shake off her squeaky clean Sound of Music image, a move that horrified the real-life Julie Andrews, but was fully supported by her on-screen father, Christopher Plummer. Louisa was the prankster, but the heart of the children was always Liesl, the eldest sister who sang about being 16, but died fighting a disease that stole her memories of that magical summer. Charmian Carr joined the film 1965 as Liesl von Trapp at 23, the eternal teenager whose 16 going on 17 romance masked a life of harsh reality and mental decline. Charmian Carr was 21 years old, not 16, when she immortalized the role of Liesl, the eldest daughter. She was the envy of every girl in America, yet her compensation was a pittance. She was paid a cumulative salary of approximately $24,000 for the film, a decent sum in 1965, but she famously received zero residuals. She later admitted that she made more money appearing in commercial endorsements for the film than she ever did from the movie itself. Carr eventually quit acting entirely to become an interior designer because the Liesl typecasting made it impossible to get other work. Her final years were a cruel irony. The woman who represented the innocence of youth was struck down by a rare form of dementia. She slowly lost her memories, her ability to recognize her siblings, and her connection to the film that defined her. She died on September 17, 2016, at the age of 73 from complications related to frontotemporal dementia. She left behind a net worth of $5 million earned primarily from her design business, which served clients like Michael Jackson. But she died knowing that to the world she would forever be trapped in a gazebo, waiting for a kiss that would never lead to a happy ending. Fun fact: during the filming of the famous 16 going on 17 dance, she slipped through the glass window of the gazebo and injured her ankle. In the final cut, you can actually see a bandage on her leg covered with makeup. It's bittersweet looking back at the cast of The Sound of Music. Though time has passed and some stars have left us, their legacy remains timeless on screen. Which story shocked or touched you the most? Let us know in the comments below. Please like and subscribe to help us keep these memories alive. Thanks for watching.